Good afternoon, Hobie.
Good afternoon.
Very good to see you.
You too. Great to see you.
Yes, wonderful to see you. What a beautiful, lovely, warm fall day. Didn't start out this way, did it?
No, it was snowing this morning a little bit, probably about 35 degrees, and now it's this gorgeous afternoon. So happy to be here.
That's the nature of fall, isn't it?
Yes.
It's that changing season, and it can change in a day.
Mm-hmm.
All in the course of a day. So, with me today, I have Hobie here, and Hobie has been coming to help us celebrate the changes of the seasons, and I've really been enjoying this. For one thing, it means I get to see Hobie. He's a busy guy. He does a lot of tours. He takes people from all over the world to places like Yellowstone National Park, and where else do you go?
Olympic National Park, Mount Rainier, Zion, Grand Canyon, North Rim and South Rim, and Bryce, and places in between. Nature is really the siren call for Hobie. Mm-hmm. So what have you brought for us today to celebrate, Hobie? Well, a couple of different things. I wanted to share some photographs, and we recognize that this might be a little bit hard to see, but we're going to have them up online.
Yeah, we'll have them up within a week.
Yeah. But I just wanted to show you a little bit about trees and the nature of the season. And this first one is called Backbone of the World. And this was taken near Blackfeet lands, but outside of the Blackfeet Reservation, also close to the southern boundary of Glacier National Park. But it's a hike some friends of ours who live locally took us on. And what I love about this photo is it's late August, but it's already beginning to feel like fall. I'd say fall starts early here in Montana, especially in the high country.
So the backbone of Montana, or just called the backbone?
Backbone of the world, because that's the Blackfeet name for the Rocky Mountains as it travels through their western boundary of what is now their reservation. But to them, that was where the world started and where all people and beings return at the end. And it's like their life-giving landscape and geography. It's where everything is connected and comes from and gets tied back together.
I'm going to explain to people who have never been to Montana that in this particular part of the Rocky Mountain Range, it just rises up out of the prairies. Mm-hmm. And there are these mountain lifts that are just vertical.
Yes.
And so you really get the idea of a wall. In fact, there are various places in there that's called the China Wall, and it looks like the backbone of an animal. I mean, it has this long, sinewy, and so it makes all the sense in the world that the Blackfeet would call it the backbone, because it does indeed seem like the backbone, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd like to show you another photograph. This one is closer to Suzanne's Dunrovin Ranch. This is on the Bitterroot River, and it's also the same river that flows by Dunrovin, except this is down near Hamilton, and I call this one Autumn on the Bitterroot. This was about 9 years ago. Really awesome October weather, because we had some cold nights and warm days, and then these cottonwoods just totally looked like they caught on fire. And it was about this time, too. It was something like October 7th or 10th, somewhere in there. And it's just fantastic because we're capturing those last warm days before the weather kind of goes to pot, and we might get snow. But this really captures living in Montana for me, as well as I think for Suzanne, this beautiful image.
Oh, it absolutely does. For one thing, the cottonwoods growing so lusciously along a river really indicate river health, don't they, Toby? Cottonwoods are meant to be flooded occasionally. And the Bitterroot River doesn't have any dams on it. There are some irrigation takeoffs, but the Bitterroot every spring floods. And that's what nourishes these wonderful cottonwood trees, which are, some people have referred to them as vertical straws, because they're softwood, but they hold a lot of moisture, and they just really are an indicator of the health of a river riparian area. Mm-hmm. And we are so fortunate in the Bitterroot to have a very vibrant, healthy cottonwood forest along pretty much the length of it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Same goes for the Blackfoot River and other rivers nearby.
Yeah.
But that's just a classic picture of autumn on the Bitterroot. We're moving to Yellowstone in this photograph, but it looks about the same as it does here, except a couple weeks earlier. This is probably late September, so about 2 weeks before this time of year. And what's cool about aspen trees is that really what you're looking at here is one tree. They all share the same root system, so they're clones of each other. And there are places in Colorado where an entire mountainside might be actually one tree because they're all sharing the same root system. And this picture is taken near Slough Creek in Yellowstone. You'll see bison in the background. But if you're there late September, very early October, this is what you'll see. And again, this time of year, Yellowstone and western Montana have similar weather, but in a couple of weeks, they're definitely going to have a lot more winter while we're still enjoying a couple more days like this.
Yeah, they're higher than we are. And Hobie, am I correct in saying that they think that the world's largest organism is indeed an aspen grove in Colorado?
I believe so, and if not, it might be some kind of a fungal community somewhere in the U.S. Northwest or maybe extreme southwestern B.C., but
Yeah.
they're in the top 5, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing, this one huge plant that shares a root system.
And another neat thing about the aspen tree is that they're able to conduct photosynthesis through the bark.
Really?
So for example, in April and May, you'll see the bark kind of becoming a lighter green before it's able to produce its leaves. And some biologists that I learned from in Yellowstone said that maybe that's why in some places like Yellowstone, where you don't have too many deciduous trees, meaning trees that shed their leaves, that this tree has a leg up. It's able to compete in a place where you don't have a lot of deciduous trees.
Growing season.
Yes.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and so that's a beautiful photo called Yellowstone Autumn. And by the way, these cards and images are for sale as cards as well as large sign prints. And I want to kind of change topics here for a moment and show you another tree that is common to western Montana but not east of the divide,
Right.
the western red cedar.
Yeah.
And this one is called Cedar Sentinel. I really like the bark and just the way that the tree was growing. But you'll find these in very wet places. I know up Lolo Creek.
Yep.
Some of the drainages.
South Fork of Lolo Creek. We have a ride that goes through a very deep canyon. And at the bottom of the canyon, you start off with cedar trees. And by the top of the canyon, you're in ponderosa pine, and it's very sparse.
Wow.
It's just a wonderful ride because you can really see the moisture, the difference in moisture. The deep canyon holds it,
Mhm.
and as it comes out like a V, you get away from that moisture, and the forest changes.
And some of these trees can live up to 1,000 years old. And although the tree size here is kind of small potatoes compared to Washington State and Alaska, it's pretty impressive though that, like, in contrast to Suzanne's ranch where you've got cottonwoods and some aspen and some ornamental trees, just 10 miles away you've got cedars.
I could ride my horse to see a cedar tree.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great day.
Yeah, I think we should.
Let's do it. This photograph is from Glacier National Park. I called it Glacier Gold, and it's on the east side. It's I'm going to space out the name here, but it's one of the east side drainages, and it's an October day too. And on this particular day, we saw 5 moose in the parking lot here. Oh, it's the Two Medicine area, and there's a couple of people hiking in the photograph as well. But just a reminder that fall is pretty brief here. Sometimes it's followed pretty quickly by winter.
Yes.
Some years it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I don't understand, Hobie, and maybe you do, and if not, maybe we could look it up for our viewers. I don't understand what makes the difference between a really bright, vivid fall and a kind of a dull fall. I mean, the falls definitely are different depending upon weather conditions, but I don't understand what determines what. Do you?
I don't think I do either. The one anecdotal thing I would say is in 2009 we had a brutal first frost. It got down to something like 8 or 10 degrees, and it froze all the leaves on the trees.
Yes.
And the leaves were really dull, and they didn't really blow off or fall off until April or May when the leaves were coming back the next spring.
Yes.
And that was, I don't know, kind of sad in a way. I kept thinking, why don't the leaves fall off? But it just seemed like a somber fall because we just didn't have the golden colors that year.
Right. So I'm sure it has to do with the duration and the degree of temperature and what time during when they're ceasing to be photogenic, where all that happens. I want to look that up because I've been wondering that. Some falls are really truly more vivid than others.
Absolutely. And then this is a picture of some trees. They were probably lodgepole pine trees. This is in Yellowstone. This is between Old Faithful and Madison Village or Madison Junction going north. But the reason why these trees have died is because of thermal activity. And what's happening is that, thermal waters and just the thermal ground at some point has overwhelmed the trees. And probably what happened initially is that these trees were drawing up some silica from the thermal features, and eventually it just flooded and killed the tree. And this is an area where a lot of people like to take photographs in the winter, and some people call these trees bobby socks trees because they pulled up the silica to a certain point. So there's like a color change a couple feet up where it looks like it pulled silica that far up, and then the rest of the tree is this other discolored, dead color. But if you've never been to Yellowstone in the winter, you should owe it to yourself to go at least once. And if you can't go in person, go virtually, because it's a different, winter wonderland compared to anything we live near here.
Yes, I've never seen these trees. You've piqued my interest.
Yeah, they're wonderful.
For sure. I've been to Yellowstone in the winter, but I've not seen those trees.
Yeah, this is a fantastic area.
So where is this in Yellowstone?
It's north of Old Faithful, as if you're heading towards Madison.
Okay.
So, as an example, if the western boundary of the park were West Yellowstone, and you come in from West Yellowstone, Montana by snowmobile or by snow coach, or if you're really hardy, by skis or snowshoes, you go in about 14 miles to Madison, and then you go south to Old Faithful. It's midway between Old Faithful and Madison.
Oh, I'm going to have to remember that.
But it's a fantastic place. But I'd like to shift gears a little bit here and tell you about bears, because it's a thing that we're all concerned about when we live in suburbia or on farms or ranches in Montana. And, for example, my father-in-law has had bears in his neighborhood in the Upper Rattlesnake, which is just north of downtown. And I'm curious, have you had bears in your neighborhood?
Well, the reason, in part, that this comes up at this time of year is the orchards in Missoula, and we certainly have a very active orchard. Attracts the bears. They love apples and pears and anything else they can get their hands on. And yes, we've had bears, not in our orchard, but we have crab apples right off of our deck. And one fine morning I went out the deck and there's a bear in the tree, in our little crab apple tree, a little black bear. And then on the state land right adjacent to us, there's an old crab apple tree that has some pretty healthy crab apples, and I walked right under a bear. Had no idea it was there until I came back by, and I said, "Oh, there's a bear."
Was that a mama bear, or
just
who knows what kind of bear?
A black bear.
Okay.
A very black bear.
Wow.
Yeah, it was fun.
That gets your blood going.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to show you a photograph here of some grizzly bear tracks. This was taken up on the Rocky Mountain front, east of Glacier Park and east of the Bob Marshall Wilderness, where I believe Susanna spent some time.
And well, in fact, I do have a grizzly bear story. I did take some people up horseback riding, and I'm riding with 6 other people, and I see this group of people over right near a drainage, and so I ride over there. And it's somebody that was a co-worker of my husband's, a guy named Chris Servine, who was the grizzly bear recovery coordinator for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for many years in this area. And they had just tagged a grizzly sow, and she had 2 cubs. And I was just about to ride exactly where they had released this grizzly. And so they said to me, "Whoa, Suzanne, take your group in a big detour around this drainage." So indeed I did.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah, I am too. I'm glad that I met up with them. I could easily have gone right down there, and she was not a happy camper. She was trying to gather up her little cubs. Yeah.
But yeah, these grizzly tracks are pretty big. I mean, just imagine that they're bigger than your human hand, say from your thumb to your middle finger. Just add about another half that size in some cases, whether you're going lengthwise or widthwise. And these were in the mud, and I call this picture Grizz Tracks. And the same day, you'll have to bear with me in my humor, this is a picture called Coyote Tops Grizz, but what happened is we found a massive pile of bear scat, and that is a scientific word and an educational word compared to the other 4-letter S word. But what I want you just to notice on this is it was a massive pile of berries that it had been eating.
Full of berries.
Full of berries, which is kind of typical July, August into September.
Yeah.
And then a little coyote decided to come by and say, "Hey, this is my territory too," or perhaps he was saying, "Ha-ha," or maybe, who knows why, but I just thought that was a little bit of wildlife humor.
Juxtaposition, yeah.
And anyway, if you're at Rocky Moody's in Missoula, they carry this card.
That's great.
But anyway, it just shows you the massive amount. We saw piles and piles of this, and basically grizzly bears and black bears will eat some of the same things, but they'll eat tons, not literally, but just
choke
lots.
Cherries
Choke cherries,
yeah.
And then some other things too.
Yeah, when we ride
Raspberry.
up there, and that's in this country, we ride through, I mean, the choke cherries can get really high, and, I'm always very careful to sing or to yodel to let the bears know. I don't think there's a problem with bears, and 8 riders are not going to bother us. They're going to move off.
Right.
But you need to know that we're coming. And so my poor clients have to put up with me yodeling or singing.
But it's a good strategy because you need to be making noise, traveling in a large group, and then also on a windy day you need to make more noise because maybe they can't hear you.
Right.
And if you're hiking or traveling by horse near water, again you need to make even more noise because water will kind of mask or muffle your sound, so you just need to be extra loud.
Right.
And some people go, well, you might not see much wildlife. I would argue, why do you want to see a grizzly close range that, might have a different idea about you?
Yeah. Well, we saw them there at a distance, and I was always glad it was at a distance, but it was exciting to see them for sure.
Oh, always. My preference is from a car or, 1,000 feet away, or if they're on the other side of a ravine.
Yeah.
But that doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes they're
right there,
and you just have to deal. And the big idea is, my personal feeling about wildlife management is it's people management, and if we can manage people and educate them about how to be safe around bears, the bears have a better chance at living a long life and being part of, the culture and the ecosystems here. I'll hold this up too, a little bit of a difference between the grizzly bear and the black bear, and I apologize for not remembering where this came from, but I think it was a state of Montana government website for hunters where you had to learn the difference in order to get your black bear hunting license. But with the grizzly, they've got this dished-in face profile. Looks kind of pushed in. The black bear is more of a straight-face profile. The black bear has taller ears. The grizzly bear has shorter, more rounded ears. I hope you never have to be so close that you have to tell them apart by the claws, but the front claw of the grizzly bear is 2 to 4 inches long, each one, because they were originally more plains animals, and they are still tremendous diggers. The front claw for the black bear is about 1.5 inches long, and they're better tree climbers, but they both climb very well. And then if you're looking at the profile of a grizzly bear, the shoulder hump is the tallest part of the body. And if you're looking at the black bear, basically the butt or the back end is the tallest part of the body. And color is a really bad way to tell them apart, especially in Western Canada, Western United States, and historically Western Mexico, where they are no longer.
Yeah, the cinnamon black bears. There are brown black bears. There are even white black bears, the Coyote bear in British Columbia.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are a lot more black bears than there are grizzly bears, but you're much more likely to see a black bear than a grizzly. But I also wanted to show you a track cast. This was courtesy of a biologist named James Halfpenny, who does a lot of work involving carnivore and predator-prey relationships. He teaches tracking classes at Yellowstone. He takes people up to look at polar bears and study the Arctic ecology. I've taken several classes with him. So this is a cast that he made from a grizzly bear a while back. And I'm just going to check the date. This was from Beaver Lake in Yellowstone Park, July 4th, 1999. That's when he made the cast, and I made a cast from that. But one thing I'd like you just to notice, and Suzanne, if I could just ask you to hold that up for a moment, we're just going to compare the tracks here and the toes, and you'll notice that here almost all the toes are above this line at the top of the foot pad. And that's a big contrast to a black bear where you pretty much have, some of the toes below the top of the foot pad. So this is a grizzly bear track. Thanks. And just imagine that on top of where these toes are, you've got 2 to 4 inch claws. So just consider the size of that track. That's a big animal.
That's a very big
animal. And I would just like to say, too, that when you live and work and travel in grizzly bear country, you don't have to be terrified. Still, your odds of being injured or killed are greater in traffic or lightning or drowning or all these other things. But there's nothing more, I think, I don't know, heartbeat inducing than being in grizzly bear country. And I think for me personally, it's just a reminder that we're not always the top of the food chain. And the big question I always have for myself and people is, how can we protect and conserve and preserve places so these big wild critters, which are the critters that Lewis and Clark saw when they came through, and what many Native American tribes basically grew up with in their culture, how can we kind of create that space and place for them to continue to thrive at the same time that we want to thrive too? And it's a rhetorical question. No need to answer it today, but I just want to throw that out there because they've got a place on this landscape. We've got a place on this landscape. Big question. Can we get along?
You know, I think that you just alluded to something that I think is really important for those of us who have had the great privilege of being out in really wild country. And that is being among large predators really heightens your own awareness and your own senses. There was a time in our ancestral background when we were the hunted, and we were in danger of being hunted, and that still can be true among large predators worldwide. And there's just something really spiritual about being in a country where you still have to be hyper aware, and that hyper awareness many times gives you a much deeper experience. It does for me. And you know, I've spent quite a bit of my time in grizzly bear country or brown bear country in Alaska, as well as in Montana, and just their presence, just you knowing that they're there and seeing their sign and coming up to a fishing hole and seeing all kinds of grizzly bear tracks makes you, it gives you a pause. It gets your heart rate going, and you just sort of recognize that you're part of a larger system. It's very rewarding.
Yeah, it's like being a visitor to another culture or country where, you know, it's someone else's rules or customs or something else's rules or customs. It's really humbling, and for me personally, after a trip in grizzly country, I just feel really re-energized, revitalized, rejuvenated, and just grateful I'm home and safe in my own bed again.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I'd like to know if all of you are interested enough for us to organize, you know, maybe a panel of some people who are really familiar with bears. If you'd like to know more about bears, you know, my husband studied bears for some 35 years, and he has handled and tagged polar bears, brown bears, black bears, even brown bears in Pakistan. So bears are a really fun and interesting topic, and they're one of the things that really distinguishes our Montana back country. You know, there's few places in the lower 48, Wyoming and Montana, little bits of Idaho and Washington, that where grizzly bears can still be found, and it makes them, you know, very special.
Absolutely.
Well, Hobie, this has really been fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your coming, and I'll get digital copies of the photos that Hobie showed us today, and indeed you go to Hobie's website if you would like to purchase any of these. Give them your website, Hobie.
It's yourlifenature.com. It's YOURLIFE as in life, nature, NATURE, yourlifenature.com.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for joining us on this really wonderful sunny afternoon. We are having some Pony Club makeup here. We see some kids playing on the lawn. Some kids are riding the horses, and it's just, we know it's one of those last days of summer-like weather, and we're lapping it up. And I hope that you are lapping up the last days of these beautiful fall days in your own part of the world. And thank you very much for coming and sharing with us. So goodbye, and we will sign off.
Goodbye.
Jul's saying goodbye too. I hope you've been able to see her. She's been
and Clearla, she's saying goodbye. He's saying goodbye too.
He's saying goodbye too. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.